The damaged ship appeared in Earth's sky on a Tuesday morning. It was huge, nearly 2 miles long, and covered in scorch marks that told stories of battles fought and barely survived. Air Force jets scrambled from 3 different bases, their pilots tense and ready. But the ship made no aggressive moves. Instead, it broadcast a simple message in perfect English. "I am Queen Valera of the Kashan Empire. I come in peace. I need to speak with your leaders." Within hours, the world was watching. Every news channel showed the alien ship hovering over the Atlantic Ocean. Social media exploded with theories, fears, and excitement. This was first contact. The moment humanity had wondered about for generations. But it was not happening the way anyone had imagined. Queen Valera came to the United Nations building in New York in a smaller shuttle. When she stepped out, cameras flashed from every direction. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin that looked like it was made of crystal. It shifted colors as she moved, flowing from deep blue to soft purple. Her eyes were large and golden, and they carried a weight that made even hardened reporters fall silent. She wore robes that seemed to be made of light itself, flowing and changing with each step. But beneath the alien beauty, anyone who looked closely could see exhaustion. Her shoulders sagged slightly, her hands trembled. This was not a conquering queen arriving to demand submission. This was someone who had run out of options. The emergency session of the United Nations began at 3 in the afternoon. Representatives from every nation filled the hall. Queen Valera stood at the center podium, her translator device converting her words into dozens of languages simultaneously. "My people are dying," she began. Her voice was soft but clear. 3 years ago, the Draxian Collective invaded our space. We are a peaceful civilization. We have been at peace for over 3,000 years. We had no army, no weapons designed for war. We believed that reason and diplomacy could solve any conflict. She paused, and her skin shifted to a darker blue. The translator device noted this meant sadness. We were wrong. The Draxians do not negotiate. They conquer. They destroy. We had 12 star systems. Now we have 3. We had 15 billion people. Now we have less than 2 billion. They are hunting us across the galaxy, and we are losing. A holographic display appeared above her head. Images of beautiful cities being bombed from orbit. Ships exploding in space. Refugees fleeing in whatever vessels they could find. Children crying for parents who would never come home. The assembly watched in silence. "I went to the galactic community," Valera continued. "I begged them to help. They have rules, protocols. They said they could not interfere in what they called a regional conflict. They said they feared making the Draxians angry. They said many things, but what they meant was that they would not risk their own comfort to save my people." Her skin flashed red for a moment. Anger. "I studied your species before I came here. Your planet is not yet part of the Galactic Alliance. By their rules, you are still developing, still learning. But I read your history. I saw what your people do when faced with evil. I saw how you fought against those who would exterminate others. I saw how ordinary people stood up when their leaders would not. I came here because I believe that humanity might have what the rest of the galaxy has lost: courage." She looked around the assembly hall, meeting the eyes of as many representatives as she could. "I am not asking you to fight our war for us. I am asking you to teach us how to fight. My people have ships, technology, resources, but we do not have the will to use violence, even to save ourselves. We need teachers. We need people who understand war, who can show us how to protect what we love. In return, we offer you our technology, our knowledge, a place in the galactic community, and the eternal friendship of the Kashan people." The assembly erupted into debate. The American representative stood up first. "Your Majesty, we sympathize with your situation. But Earth has its own problems. We have limited resources. We cannot afford to send our people to fight in a war light years away." The Russian representative agreed. "This is not our conflict. We have just learned that alien life exists. We cannot immediately involve ourselves in galactic politics." The Chinese representative added, How do we know this is not a trap? How do we know you are telling the truth? One by one, the representatives voiced their concerns. The risks were too high. The costs were too great. Earth needed to think of itself first. Some spoke with genuine regret. Others seemed relieved to have an excuse to refuse. Queen Valera listened to each objection. Her skin grew paler, shifting toward gray. Defeat. Outside the United Nations building, thousands of people had gathered. Giant screens showed the proceedings inside. The crowd was diverse, filled with people from every background. Some held signs welcoming the alien queen. Others demanded answers. Many just wanted to witness history. Among them was Jake Mitchell, a construction worker from Ohio. He was 32 years old, average height, with dark hair and calloused hands. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt. He had come to New York to visit his sister Beth, who lived in Brooklyn. When news of the alien arrival broke, Beth insisted they go to the UN building to see what would happen. Jake watched the screens as the politicians spoke. He saw the images of destroyed cities and dying refugees. He saw the exhaustion in the alien queen's golden eyes, and something in his chest tightened. His grandfather had fought in World War II. Jake grew up hearing stories about the camps that were liberated, the people who were saved. His grandfather always said the same thing at the end of those stories. We had to go. When you see evil like that, you cannot look away. You cannot pretend it is not your problem. Because the moment you stop caring about others is the moment you lose your humanity. On the screen, the assembly was taking a vote. It was clear which way it would go. The representatives would express their sympathy and wish the queen luck, but Earth would not help. Jake felt his sister's hand on his arm. It's not right, Beth whispered. Those people need help. I know, Jake said. The vote concluded. The decision was made. Earth would not provide assistance. The Secretary General stood to deliver the official refusal. His words careful and diplomatic. Queen Valera's skin had gone completely gray. She bowed her head slightly, accepting defeat. She had traveled across the galaxy, spent her last hope on this one chance, and it had failed. Her people would die, and she would die with them. Jake did not make a conscious decision. One moment he was standing in the crowd, watching. The next moment he was pushing forward, his voice rising above the noise. I'll go. Security guards turned toward him. People nearby stared. But Jake kept moving forward, kept shouting, I'll go, I'll help her. The words carried through the crowd. Someone near him pulled out a phone and started recording. Within seconds, the video was streaming live. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Jake reached the security barrier and stopped. He was just one man, nobody special, with no authority or power. But he had said the words, and now the world was watching. Inside the assembly hall, someone's phone buzzed, then another, then dozens. Representatives looked at their screens and saw the video of a single human volunteer offering to help an alien queen save her dying civilization. The Secretary General paused his speech. The hall fell silent as everyone checked their devices. Queen Valera, standing at the podium with her head bowed in defeat, looked up as her own advisor showed her the video. Outside, the crowd began to change. Other voices joined Jake's. A woman to his left shouted that she would go too. A man behind him raised his hand. Then 10 people. Then 100. The sound grew like a wave, rolling through the thousands gathered at the UN building. Jake stood at the barrier, his heart pounding, and wondered what he had just started. The security guards did not know what to do. Protocol said to remove anyone who disrupted the proceedings, but Jake Mitchell was not causing a disturbance in the traditional sense. He was offering to help. And behind him, hundreds of others were doing the same. The cameras were recording everything. The whole world was watching. The American ambassador made a quick decision. He spoke into his radio, then nodded to the guards. They would bring Jake inside, let him speak, and then deal with the situation properly. It would look better than dragging him away on live television. Jake was escorted through security checkpoints, past diplomats and staff, who stared at him like he had grown a second head. His hands were shaking, but he kept his back straight. He had opened his mouth, and now he had to follow through. His grandfather would have expected nothing less. The assembly hall was more impressive in person than on the screens. The curved rows of seats rose up on all sides. Hundreds of people watched him walk to the center. Queen Valera stood at the podium, her crystalline skin shifting from gray to a cautious blue. Hope, maybe. Or just confusion. The Secretary General gestured for Jake to approach. His voice was tight, with barely controlled irritation. "Young man, you have disrupted an official United Nations session. However, given the unusual circumstances, we will allow you to speak. Briefly, state your name and your business." Jake stopped a few feet from the podium. He looked up at Queen Valera. She was even taller up close, and her golden eyes seemed to look straight through him, but he saw something in her face that made his fear fade. She was terrified, not of him, but of losing everything. "My name is Jake Mitchell," he said. His voice came out stronger than he expected. "I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I work construction. I heard what the Queen said, and I want to help. I'll go with her. I'll do whatever she needs." The British representative leaned forward. "Mr. Mitchell, do you understand what you are volunteering for? This is a war. An alien war. You could die." "Yes, sir," Jake said. "I understand that. And you still want to go?" "Yes, sir." The French representative spoke next. "Why? You have no connection to these people. This is not your fight." Jake thought about that for a moment. He could give a simple answer and sit down. But these people needed to understand. Not just the politicians in this room, but everyone watching around the world. "My grandfather fought in World War II, Jake said. "He was at the liberation of one of the camps. He used to tell me about what he saw there. The people who were barely alive, who had been through hell, who had lost everything. He said the worst part was thinking about all the people who knew it was happening and did nothing. All the people who said it was not their problem." He looked around the assembly hall, meeting as many eyes as he could. "He told me that when you see someone who needs help, really needs help, you do not look away. You do not make excuses. You help, because if you do not, if you decide that other people's suffering is not your concern, then you lose something important. You lose the thing that makes you human." He turned back to Queen Valera. "I saw the pictures of your people. I saw the cities burning and the kids crying. I saw you standing here, asking for help, and watching everyone find reasons to say no. And I thought about my grandfather. I thought about what he would do." The hall was silent. Jake took a breath and continued, "I am not a soldier. I am not anyone special. But I can learn. And if you need someone to teach your people how to fight, I will learn everything I can so I can help you. Because that is what we should do. That is what humans should do." Queen Valera's skin shifted to a bright, clear blue. Her voice, when she spoke, was thick with emotion. "You would leave your world, your family, everything you know, to help people you just met?" "Yes," Jake said simply. "I would." "Why do you believe you can make a difference?" "You are one person." Jake smiled slightly. "I am one person right now. But I bet I am not the only one who feels this way. I bet there are thousands of people watching this who want to help. They just needed someone to go first." He was right. While Jake spoke in the assembly hall, the footage of his statement was spreading across the internet like wildfire. Social media platforms crashed from the traffic. News organizations interrupted their programming. In living rooms, offices, and bars around the world, people watched a construction worker from Ohio offer to fight in an alien war. And they responded. Within an hour, a website set up by volunteers to gauge interest in helping Queen Valera received 10,000 registrations. Within 3 hours, it was 50,000. By the end of the day, it was over 200,000. People from every continent, every background, every walk of life. Veterans who had combat experience, engineers who could help with technology, doctors and nurses, teachers, and ordinary people like Jake who simply wanted to help. The governments could not ignore it. This was not just a diplomatic incident anymore. This was a movement. The American ambassador spoke quietly with his staff, then addressed the assembly. Perhaps we were too hasty in our decision. Clearly, there is significant public interest in providing assistance to the Kashan people. I propose we adjourn for 2 hours to reconsider our position. The session broke. Jake was led to a side room where he sat with Queen Valera and several diplomatic advisors. The Queen's skin kept shifting colors as she processed what was happening. Blue for hope, green for gratitude, purple for confusion. I have visited 9 civilizations seeking help, she said softly. I spoke with leaders of empires that span hundreds of worlds. I offered technology, resources, territory. None would help, and then I come to a world that barely knows the galaxy exists, and a construction worker volunteers without hesitation. I do not understand. No, Jake shrugged. Maybe that is why we are different. We have not learned to look away yet. We are still young enough to be stupid and brave. One of the advisors, a woman named Carol Hughes who worked for the State Department, leaned forward. Mr. Mitchell, you have started something that could change history. But you need to understand what you are asking for. If Earth agrees to let volunteers help, it means humans will die in an alien war. It means we might make enemies before we have even joined the galactic community. It means taking a huge risk. I know, Jake said. But not taking a risk means watching good people die when we could have saved them. That is a bigger risk. That is the risk of losing our souls. Carol studied him for a moment, then nodded. I will recommend that we allow volunteers. But this is your responsibility now. You started this. You will have to see it through. I will, Jake promised. When the assembly reconvened, the mood had changed. The representatives had seen the numbers. They had heard from their own citizens. They had watched Jake's speech replayed 100 times on every channel. They could not stop this wave even if they wanted to. The Secretary General spoke carefully. The United Nations cannot officially endorse military action in an extraterrestrial conflict. However, we recognize the rights of individual citizens to make their own choices. Therefore, we will not prevent volunteers from traveling with Queen Valera. Any who wish to go may do so. But they go as private citizens, not as representatives of Earth or any nation. It was a compromise. The governments could claim they had not started a war, but they would not stop their people from helping. It was enough. Queen Valera stood and bowed deeply, a gesture of profound respect in her culture. You have given my people a chance to survive. We will never forget this. From this day forward, humans and Kashan are allies, and when you need us, we will stand with you, as you stand with us now. Over the next 3 weeks, the volunteers gathered. Military bases around the world became staging areas. The numbers were refined as people with useful skills were prioritized. Combat veterans, military strategists, engineers, medical personnel, language experts, pilots, teachers who could train others. Jake's sister Beth came to say goodbye at the staging area in Nevada. She hugged him tightly. Mom would be proud, she said. Dad too. And definitely Grandpa. I know, Jake said. That is why I have to go. Come back to me, Beth said fiercely. You started this thing. You do not get to die in space before you finish it. Jake laughed despite the tears in his eyes. I will do my best. The final count was 12,000 volunteers from 47 countries. They came from different backgrounds and spoke different languages. But they shared one thing. They had all decided that some things were worth standing up for. Queen Valera walked among them as they prepared to board the Kashan ships. She touched hands, learned names, tried to understand what drove these strange, brave creatures. When she reached Jake, she stopped. You changed everything, she said. One voice in a crowd. And now 12,000 follow. How did you know they would come? Jake looked at the volunteers around him. A grandmother from Japan who had been a military nurse. A farmer from Brazil who grew up hunting. A software engineer from India. A firefighter from Australia. A teacher from Canada. All of them ready to travel to the stars. I did not know they would come, Jake admitted. I just knew I had to. And I hoped I was not the only one who felt that way. Valera's skin shifted to a warm gold color. Deep affection and respect. Humans are either the bravest species in the galaxy or the most foolish, she said. I have not decided which. Can we be both? Jake asked with a smile. Perhaps, Valera said. Perhaps that is what makes you special. The ships lifted off 3 days later, carrying 12,000 human volunteers toward a war that was not theirs, to save a people they had just met, because a construction worker from Ohio had decided he could not look away. The journey through space took 14 days. Jake spent the first 3 throwing up. Faster-than-light travel did not agree with the human digestive system. Half the volunteers were sick at first, but their bodies adapted. The Kashan medical staff helped, giving them medicine that eased the worst symptoms. Jake shared quarters with 5 other men on the flagship. There was Peter Hayes, a former Marine drill instructor who was 45 and had more combat experience than the rest of them combined. There was Danny Cruz from Los Angeles, 27, who had been an Army Ranger. There was Greg Foster, a quiet man from Montana who had spent 15 years as a police tactical officer. There was Kevin Park, a martial arts instructor from Seattle. And there was an older man named Henry Scott, who had served in 3 different conflicts and decided he had one more fight left in him. They bonded quickly, the way men do when facing danger together. They talked about their families, their reasons for coming, their fears. Peter joked that he had spent his whole career teaching young Marines how to fight, and now he would teach aliens. Danny worried about whether human tactics would work against alien enemies. Greg just wanted to make sure the Kashan understood how to work as a team. Kevin thought the whole thing was insane but could not have stayed home. Henry said he was too old to change, so he might as well die doing something useful. Jake listened, more than he talked. He was not a soldier like the others. But Queen Valera had asked him to be her advisor. Someone who could give her a perspective that was not military. She said she needed to understand how ordinary humans thought, because ordinary Kashan would be the ones fighting this war. The training began on the 5th day. The Kashan soldiers gathered in the main hangar bay of the flagship. There were 300 of them on this ship alone. And they looked nervous. Their crystalline skin shifted between pale blue and gray, colors that indicated anxiety and fear. Peter stood in front of them with Jake translating. The translation devices worked well, but Peter wanted a human voice for this first meeting. I am not going to lie to you, Peter began. War is terrible. It is loud and violent and people die. But war is also necessary sometimes. When someone is trying to kill you and everyone you love, you have to fight back. You have to be willing to do hard things to protect what matters. The Kashan listened silently. Their skin colors showed their emotions clearly. Fear, doubt, sadness. You come from a peaceful culture, Peter continued. That is beautiful. That is something to be proud of. But right now, your people need you to be something else. They need you to be warriors. And I am going to teach you how. Over the next 9 days, the training was intense. Peter and the other combat veterans taught basic hand-to-hand fighting. The Kashan were naturally strong, their crystalline bodies harder to injure than human flesh. But they hesitated before every strike. Their empathy made them feel their opponent's pain, even in training. A woman named Lisa Park, a military strategist who had planned operations in 3 different theaters of war, worked with the Kashan commanders. She taught them about misdirection, about using the enemy's expectations against them, about attacking supply lines instead of always engaging in direct combat. The Draxians are stronger than you in a straight fight, Lisa explained to a group of Kashan officers. So do not fight straight. Hit them where they are weak. Make them chase you. Make them waste resources. A war is not won by the biggest army. It is won by the army that makes fewer mistakes. The Kashan commanders absorbed the information like sponges. They were highly intelligent. Their minds adapted for complex pattern recognition. They just needed to learn to think like soldiers instead of artists and diplomats. Jake spent his time moving between groups, observing and helping where he could. He was not qualified to teach combat or strategy, but he could talk to the Kashan soldiers who were struggling. He could listen to their fears and help them work through the mental barriers. One young Kashan soldier named Korin approached him on the 8th day. Korin's skin was almost completely gray, and his hands shook. "I cannot do this," Korin said quietly. "Every time I try to strike someone, even in training, I feel their fear. I feel their pain. It stops me. I cannot hurt others, even to save myself." Jake sat down next to him. "That empathy is a gift," he said. "It makes you a good person. But right now, you need to learn to set it aside temporarily. Not forever. Just when you are in danger." "How?" Korin asked. "How do humans do this? How do you hurt others and live with it?" Jake thought about his grandfather's stories, about soldiers who came home changed, haunted by what they had done, about the weight that violence left on a person's soul. "We do not do it easily," Jake admitted. "It costs us something. But we do it because the alternative is worse. We fight so that the people we love do not have to. We carry that weight so others can live in peace. It is a burden, but it is a burden worth carrying." Korin's skin shifted to a lighter blue. "Understanding, maybe. Or at least acceptance. Your people volunteered to carry this burden for us," Korin said. "You came across the galaxy to teach us how to fight our own war. That is a great gift. Then honor that gift by learning," Jake said. "Become what your people need you to be. And when the war is over, go back to being the peaceful person you want to be. Do not let the war change you permanently, just let it change you enough to survive." Jake had similar conversations with dozens of Kashan soldiers. He became a kind of counselor, helping them reconcile their peaceful nature with the violence they needed to learn. It was exhausting work, but it was important. Queen Valera called him to her quarters on the 10th day. Her rooms were beautiful, filled with art from Kashan worlds. Crystal sculptures that sang in harmonic frequencies, paintings that shifted and changed based on the viewer's emotional state, books written in a language that looked like flowing water. "Sit," Valera said, gesturing to a chair that formed itself to Jake's body. "We need to talk about what comes next." Jake sat. "The battle?" "Yes. We are 3 days from Kashan space. Our scouts report a Draxian fleet moving to intercept us. They know we have returned with help, and they want to destroy us before we can reach our remaining worlds." "How many ships?" Jake asked. 43. We have 38. The Draxians have superior weapons and more experience. By all calculations, we should lose." Jake studied the Queen's face. Her skin was shifting between blue and green. Hope and determination. "But you think we might win?" "I think we have something they do not expect," Valera said. "We have humans. We have new tactics. We have soldiers who are learning to fight instead of just dying. For the first time in this war, I believe we have a chance." "What do you need from me?" Jake asked. "I need you to coordinate communications during the battle. The human volunteers are spread across all our ships. They will be advising our commanders, helping our soldiers, showing us how to fight. But they need someone to keep them connected, to share information between ships. You are not a soldier, Jake Mitchell. But you started this. You are the reason these people came. They will listen to you." Jake felt the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders. 12,000 humans had followed his example. If he failed them, if his decisions got them killed, that would be on him. "I will do my best," he said. Valera's skin shifted to gold. "That is all any of us can do." The last 3 days of the journey were spent preparing for battle. The human veterans ran combat drills with Kashan soldiers. Lisa Park went over the battle plan with every commander, making sure they understood their roles. The medical teams prepared for casualties. Engineers checked every system on every ship. Jake spent time with each group of human volunteers, learning their names and positions. He would be coordinating them during the fight, so he needed to know who they were and what they could do. He met a doctor from Germany named Franz, who had served in field hospitals in conflict zones. He met a pilot from South Africa named Michelle who could fly anything with wings or engines. He met a young woman from Mexico named Rosa, who had been a tactical communications specialist in her country's military. Each of them had a story. Each of them had chosen to be here. And each of them was ready to risk everything for people they barely knew. On the 13th day, the sensors detected the Draxian fleet. They were waiting at the edge of Kashan space, blocking the path home. Their ships were dark and angular, built for war and nothing else. Peter found Jake on the observation deck. Together they looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere beyond them, the enemy was waiting. "You scared?" Peter asked. "Terrified," Jake admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just do not let it stop you from doing what needs to be done. Any advice?" Peter was quiet for a moment. "Yeah. Remember why we came. These people need us. When things get bad, and they will get bad, remember that we are here to help someone who asked for it. That is worth fighting for. That is worth dying for, if it comes to that." Jake nodded. He thought about Queen Valera's exhausted face when she first arrived on Earth. He thought about Corin and the other young Kashan soldiers who were learning to fight against every instinct they had. He thought about his grandfather and his sister and all the people watching from Earth. "We are going to win," Jake said. It was not a question or a hope. It was a decision. "Damn right we are," Peter agreed. The 14th day began with alarms. The Draxian fleet was moving to engage. Queen Valera stood on the bridge of the flagship. Surrounded by her commanders and advisors, Jake stood beside her, his communications array open to every ship in the fleet. "All ships," Valera said, her voice carried across the fleet through the comm system. "Today we fight for our survival. Today we show the Draxians that the Kashan are not victims. We are warriors. And we do not stand alone." She looked at Jake. He took a breath and opened a channel to every human volunteer in the fleet. "This is Jake Mitchell. I know most of you do not know me. But 3 weeks ago, I stood in a crowd on Earth and said I would help these people. And you all decided to come with me. Thank you for that. Thank you for being brave enough to stand up when the galaxy would not." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "In a few minutes, we are going to fight. Some of us might not survive. But we are going to show the Draxians what happens when they pick on someone who has humans for friends. We are going to teach them that there are people in this universe who do not look away from evil. Let us go to work." The Draxian fleet opened fire, and the battle began. The space between the two fleets filled with weapons, fire. Bright streaks of energy crossed the darkness like angry stars. The Draxian ships moved in their traditional formation, a wedge designed to concentrate firepower and break through enemy lines. They expected the Kashan to meet them head-on, as they always had before. But the Kashan fleet scattered. "All ships, execute pattern Delta." Lisa Park's voice came through the command channel. She was on the ship, Eternal Light, coordinating the fleet movements. "Make them chase you. Do not engage directly. Hit and run." The Kashan ships broke into smaller groups, each with human advisors guiding their commanders. They darted around the Draxian formation, striking at the edges, targeting engines and weapon systems instead of trying to destroy the ships outright. The Draxians adjusted, sending pursuit groups after the smaller Kashan vessels. But that was what Lisa had planned. As the Draxian fleet spread out to chase, their formation weakened. The concentrated firepower that made them so deadly became scattered and less effective. "Now," Lisa said, "all ships, converge on target Alpha. Focus fire." 6 Kashan ships attacked a single Draxian vessel from different angles. It could not defend against all of them at once. Its shields collapsed and the ship went dark, drifting in space. The Draxians had never faced tactics like this. For 3 hours, the battle continued. The Kashan lost ships, but so did the Draxians. More importantly, the Kashan were learning. Their soldiers, trained by humans over the past 2 weeks, fought with a ferocity that shocked the boarding parties who tried to capture damaged ships. Jake coordinated communications from the flagship's bridge. His voice stayed calm as he relayed information between ships, called out enemy positions, and kept the human volunteers connected. "Peter, you have boarders coming through Section 12, Jake said into his comm. Copy that. Peter's voice crackled back. He was on the ship Morning Star with a team of Kashan soldiers he had been training. We are ready for them. Through the comm link, Jake could hear the sounds of fighting. The sharp crack of human firearms, mixed with the hum of Kashan energy weapons, shouting in 2 languages, and then, silence. Section 12 is clear, Peter reported. These Draxians are tough. But they were not expecting us to actually fight back. They keep hesitating, trying to figure out what we are doing differently. The battle reached its peak when a Draxian boarding team breached the flagship's hull. Alarms blared through the corridors. Jake looked at Queen Valera. Go to the secure room, he said. They are coming for you. I will not hide while my people fight, Valera said firmly. Then stay behind me, Jake said. He had a pistol that Peter had given him, though he had never expected to use it. 30 Draxians came through the breach. They were large creatures, covered in thick armor plating that grew naturally from their bodies. They carried weapons that looked like they could punch through walls. They moved with the confidence of soldiers who had never lost. They met a mixed group of humans and Kashan in the main corridor. Peter was there with Danny Cruz and Greg Foster. A dozen Kashan soldiers stood with them, their skin showing the red color of battle rage, an emotion they had learned to embrace. The fight was brutal and close. The Draxians were strong, but the humans were quick and worked together. The Kashan, following the training they had received, supported the humans and did not hesitate when they needed to strike. When it was over, 15 Draxians were down. The humans had lost 2 volunteers and 3 Kashan soldiers were injured. But the flagship was secure. The Draxian fleet commander made a decision that changed the course of the battle. He had lost 8 ships and had not destroyed a single Kashan vessel completely. This was not supposed to happen. The Kashan were supposed to be easy prey. He ordered a retreat. As the Draxian ships withdrew, a cheer went through the Kashan fleet. It was the first time in 3 years of war that they had won a battle. The first time they had made the enemy run. Queen Valera's skin shifted through every color and sequence, emotions overwhelming her systems. Relief, joy, grief for those lost, hope for the future. We won, she said, her voice barely a whisper. We actually won. Actually won. Jake slumped against a wall, exhausted. Peter sat down next to him, a deep cut across his forehead. That was insane, Danny said, leaning on Greg for support. His leg was injured but not badly. That was war, Peter corrected. And it is just the beginning. He was right. The battle was a victory, but it was only one battle. The war continued for 6 months. The human volunteers spread across the Kashan fleet and the remaining Kashan worlds, teaching, training, and fighting alongside their alien allies. Peter established training centers on liberated planets. Young Kashan civilians learned combat techniques, learned to set aside their empathy when necessary, learned to protect themselves and their families. The Kashan military grew from 300,000 to over 2 million. They were not professional soldiers, but they were determined, and they were learning. Lisa worked with Kashan engineers to modify their ships. They added more aggressive weapon configurations, better armor, faster engines. The Kashan had always had superior technology to the Draxians, but they had never weaponized it properly. Now they did. The human volunteers paid a price. Battle after battle, the numbers decreased. 12,000 became 11,000. Then 10,000. Then 9,000. They died protecting ships from boarding parties. They died in space combat. They died teaching Kashan soldiers tactics that saved hundreds of lives but cost their own. Jake attended every memorial service. He learned every name. He wrote personal messages to the families back on Earth. It was the least he could do for the people who had followed him into this war. On a quiet night 6 months into the conflict, Jake sat with Queen Valera in her quarters. The war was going better, but the cost weighed on both of them. I see their faces every time I close my eyes, Jake said. The ones who died. I wonder if they regret following me. They do not regret it, Valera said firmly. I can sense emotions. Remember, I felt what your people felt when they volunteered. They came because they believed it was right. They believed that helping others mattered more than personal safety. That belief does not die just because they did. I hope you are right. I know I am right. Your people have given mine the greatest gift possible. Not just your tactics or your training. You gave us the belief that we deserve to survive. That we are worth fighting for. Before you came, we were defeated. We were just waiting to die. Now we fight. Now we hope. That is because of you. Jake Mitchell. Ah. 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 The turning point came at the Battle of Keshar Prime. It was the Kashan homeworld. The heart of their civilization. The Draxians gathered their remaining fleet for one massive assault. If they could destroy Keshar Prime, the war would be over. The Kashan might survive as scattered refugees, but they would never be a unified people again. 200 Draxian ships entered Kashan space. The Kashan assembled every vessel they had, 170 ships. It was the largest space battle in galactic history. Jake coordinated from the surface of Keshar Prime, while Queen Valera commanded the fleet from orbit. The battle began at dawn and continued through the day. The sky above the planet filled with explosions and debris. The Kashan ships, using the tactics Lisa had taught them, held their own. But the Draxians were desperate too. They pushed forward with a ferocity they had not shown before. This was their last chance to win the war, and they knew it. The Draxian flagship broke through the defensive line. It was massive, 3 times larger than any other ship in the battle. Its weapons began bombarding the surface, targeting population centers. Lisa's voice came through Jake's comm, tight with stress. Jake, that flagship is going to destroy the capital if we do not stop it. We are trying to flank it, but it will take too long. Jake watched from his command post as energy beams hit the city's defensive shields. The shields were strong, but they would not last forever. Already, buildings on the outskirts were collapsing. He made a decision without thinking it through. Maybe that was the only way to make this kind of decision. I can stop it, Jake said. What? How? There is a Kashan fighter here with an experimental reactor. It is unstable, but it has enough power output to overload a ship's shields if it detonates close enough. There was silence on the comm. Then Peter's voice. Jake, that is a suicide run. You cannot pilot a fighter. You will not make it. Then teach me quick, Jake said. He was already running toward the fighter bay. Jake, no. Queen Valera's voice came through. I will not allow this. There must be another way. There is not enough time for another way, Jake said. He reached the fighter and climbed into the cockpit. A Kashan pilot named Sareth ran up beside him. I will fly it, Sareth said. No, your people have lost enough. This is my choice. But you cannot fly. Then you have 30 seconds to teach me the basics. Sareth did. It was the shortest flight training in history. Throttle. Steering. Weapons. Ejection system. That was all Jake had time to learn. The fighter launched. Jake's hands shook on the controls, but he managed to keep the small ship steady. The flagship loomed above him, its weapons still firing on the city below. Jake, the ejection system is damaged. Peter's voice came through. He had run a scan of the fighter from his ship. If you do this, you cannot get out safely. I know, Jake said calmly. He had known the moment he got in the fighter. The ejection system had been damaged in an earlier battle. This was a one-way trip. He thought about his sister Beth, about his grandfather, about the 12,000 people who had volunteered because he had opened his mouth in a crowd, about Queen Valera's exhausted face and Corin's trembling hands, and all the Kashan children who would live if he could stop this ship. Worth it, he said quietly. He aimed the fighter at the flagship's bridge and pushed the throttle to maximum. The Draxians saw him coming and fired. But the fighter was small and fast. Their shots missed. Peter's voice came through one last time. It has been an honor, Jake. Same to you. Take care of them when I am gone. The fighter hit the flagship's shields, and the reactor detonated. The explosion was massive, visible from the surface. The flagship's shields collapsed, and secondary explosions rippled through its hull. It began to drift, dead in space. 3 nearby Draxian ships were caught in the blast and crippled. Jake's fighter, or what was left of it, tumbled away from the explosion. The ejection system, damaged as it was, fired. The escape pod shot out at an angle, spinning wildly. Jake's last thought before he lost consciousness was that at least he had tried. Jake woke 3 weeks later, in a medical facility that looked like it was made of light. Everything glowed softly, and there was no pain. That surprised him. He remembered the explosion, the tumbling fall, the crash. He should be dead. At minimum, he should hurt. A Kashan doctor whose skin was a gentle green noticed him stirring. She moved to his bedside quickly. "You are awake. Good. We were concerned about permanent damage, but your brain activity remained strong. How do you feel?" "I feel fine," Jake said. His voice was rough from disuse. "How is that possible?" "I crashed. Kashan medical technology is very advanced. We repaired your injuries at the cellular level. You had a fractured skull, internal bleeding, broken ribs, and severe burns. But you will recover fully." Jake tried to sit up. The doctor helped him, adjusting the bed so he was comfortable. "The war," Jake said. "What happened with the battle?" The doctor's skin shifted to bright blue. "Happiness. The war is over. Your action destroyed the Draxian flagship and crippled 3 other ships. The Draxian fleet lost its command structure and its will to fight. They retreated from Kashan space. Other civilizations in the galaxy, who had been watching and doing nothing, finally intervened. The Draxians are negotiating peace terms now. They will not bother us again." Jake closed his eyes. It was over. They had won. "How many?" he asked quietly. "How many of my people died?" The doctor's skin shifted to gray. 3,147 human volunteers did not survive the war. Their sacrifice saved billions of Kashan lives. 3,000. Jake felt the weight of that number settle on his chest. 3,000 people had followed him into this war and never went home. "They will be honored forever," the doctor said softly. "Every Kashan child will learn their names. We will build monuments on every world. They will never be forgotten." Queen Valera visited him later that day. Her skin was mostly gold, with threads of blue running through it. Relief and joy, mixed with lingering sadness. "You should not have done that," she said, sitting beside his bed. "You should not have risked yourself that way." "Someone had to," Jake said. "But why you? You are not a soldier. You are not trained for combat. You could have stayed safe on the ground." "If I had stayed safe, I could not have looked at myself in the mirror," Jake said simply. "I asked 12,000 people to come fight in a war that was not theirs. The least I could do was be willing to die in it too." Valera was quiet for a long moment. Her skin shifted through several colors as she processed her emotions. "You saved my world," she finally said. "You saved my people. I can offer you anything you want. Wealth beyond measure. Land on any Kashan planet. A position in our government. Technology that would make you the richest human alive. Name it, and it is yours." Jake thought about that. He thought about his apartment in Cleveland, his job at the construction company, his sister Beth, and her simple life in Brooklyn. "I just want to go home," he said. "I want to see my sister. I want to sleep in my own bed. I want to wake up and not hear alarms and weapons fire." "That is all? That is enough." Valera smiled, a very human expression she had learned. "You are a strange species, but I am grateful for your strangeness." "Very well. When you are ready, we will take you home. But remember that you will always have a place here. You are family to the Kashan now. Family is never forgotten." The surviving volunteers began returning to Earth 2 months after the war ended. They came back on Kashan ships that were greeted with celebrations in every port. The governments that had been hesitant to let them go now threw parades in their honor. Cities around the world held memorial services for the 3,000 who did not return. Jake returned to New York with Peter, Danny, Lisa, and the other survivors from the flagship. Beth was waiting at the landing site. She ran through the security barriers and nearly knocked Jake over with her hug. "You idiot," she said, crying. "You beautiful, stupid, brave idiot. I thought you were dead. When they told me about the flagship crash, I thought I had lost you." "I am hard to kill," Jake said, holding her tight. Apparently, the United Nations held a ceremony for the volunteers. Every nation that had sent people was represented. The Secretary General gave a speech about courage and sacrifice. Queen Valera attended in person and spoke about the debt her people owed humanity, but Jake remembered a quieter moment more clearly. It was when Peter found him after the ceremony, away from the cameras and the crowds. "We did something good," Peter said. "We saved people who needed saving." "Not everyone can say that about their life." "We lost 3,000 people," Jake said. "We did. And that hurts. But we saved 2 billion. The math is cruel, but it is what it is. Those 3,000 chose to be there. They knew the risks. And they went anyway because they believed in what we were doing. That matters," Jake nodded slowly. "I hope their families can find peace with that. Some will not. That is the cost of war. But they should know their people died as heroes. Real heroes. Not the kind from movies, but the kind who see something wrong and decide to fix it even when it is dangerous." Earth's relationship with the galaxy changed rapidly after the war. The galactic community offered immediate full membership, something unprecedented for such a young civilization. They did it because humanity had proven something important. They had shown that courage and compassion still mattered in a galaxy that had grown comfortable and cautious. The Kashan established embassies on Earth, and Earth opened embassies on Kashan worlds. Cultural exchanges began. Technology sharing programs started. Young Kashan came to Earth to study human history and military tactics. Humans traveled to Kashan space to learn advanced science and art. Jake was offered many positions. Politicians wanted him to run for office. Corporations wanted to hire him as a spokesman. Universities wanted him to teach. He turned them all down, except one. He accepted a role as the cultural liaison between Earth and the Kashan Empire. It was not a military position or a political one. His job was to help both species understand each other, to facilitate communication, to prevent the small misunderstandings that could damage the friendship they had built. He split his time between Earth and Kashan space. He learned their language properly, studied their history, came to understand their culture deeply. He taught them about humanity in return, about Earth's complicated history, about the beauty and the ugliness of human civilization. 10 years passed. The friendship between the two species grew stronger. Trade flourished. Scientific collaborations produced breakthroughs that benefited both worlds. And the memory of the war faded for most people, becoming history rather than lived experience. But Jake did not forget. Every year, on the anniversary of the final battle, he visited the memorial that had been built at the United Nations. It was a simple monument, a single figure stepping forward from a crowd, arm extended toward the stars. Names were carved into the stone around the base, 3,147 names, every human who had died in the war. On the 10th anniversary, Jake stood before the monument with Beth and her 2 children. A Kashan school group was visiting, part of their education about human history. One young Kashan child broke away from the group and approached Jake shyly. "Are you Jake Mitchell?" the child asked in heavily accented English. "I am," Jake said, kneeling down to be at eye level. "I learned about you in school. You started the volunteer movement. You saved Queen Valera's people. You are a hero." Jake shook his head gently. "I am not a hero. I am just someone who could not look away when people needed help. The real heroes are the ones whose names are on this wall. They are the ones who gave everything." "But you almost died too," the child said. "Teacher said you crashed your ship into the enemy. I did what I had to do. That does not make me special. Anyone could have done the same." Quote, the child's skin shifted to curious yellow. Then why did you do it? Why did humans help us when your own leaders said no? Jake thought about that question. It was one he had been asked many times over the years. He gave the child the most honest answer he could, because when you see someone who needs help, really needs help, you cannot just walk away. You cannot pretend it is not your problem. The moment you stop caring about others is the moment you stop being who you should be. And I guess humans, for all our faults, still believe that helping others matters. The child nodded slowly, processing this. We are taught that humans are special because you are brave. Is that true? Humans are not always brave, Jake said. We get scared just like everyone else. But sometimes, even when we are scared, we decide to act anyway. That is not bravery. That is just deciding that some things are worth being afraid for. Beth's daughter, a girl of 7 named Sophie, joined them. She had been listening to the conversation. Uncle Jake is too modest, Sophie said to the Kashan child. He did something amazing. He stood up when nobody else would. That is brave. Jake smiled and pulled Sophie close. Maybe a little brave, but mostly just stubborn. The Kashan child thanked him and returned to their group. Jake stood and looked up at the monument. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the plaza. Do you ever regret it? Beth asked quietly. Starting all of this? Losing so many people? Every day, Jake admitted. But I also know that if I had stayed silent, 2 billion Kashan would have died. The math is terrible, but it is real. 3,000 lives bought 2 billion lives, and those 3,000 chose to be there. They were not forced. They were not tricked. They went because they believed it was right. You changed the world, Beth said. You changed the galaxy. I opened my mouth in a crowd, Jake corrected. Other people did the rest. But that was not entirely true. And Jake knew it. His single action, his willingness to volunteer when everyone else was silent, had created ripples that spread across the galaxy. 5 years later, Queen Valera proposed a new galactic organization to the galactic community. She called it the Coalition of the Willing. Its purpose was simple: to protect developing civilizations from aggression and to ensure that what happened to the Kashan never happened again. Earth and the Kashan Empire were the founding members. Within a year, 7 more species joined. Within 5 years, it was 20 species. They agreed to mutual defense pacts, to sharing resources with civilizations under threat, to intervening when genocide or aggressive expansion threatened innocent people. The galaxy was changing. The old order, where powerful civilizations watched younger ones struggle and die, was being replaced by something better. Not perfect, but better. Jake attended the founding ceremony of the coalition. He sat in the back, away from the cameras and the important people. He was 47 years old now. With gray in his hair and lines on his face, he had lived a full life, splitting his time between 2 worlds, building bridges between species, helping others understand each other. Queen Valera found him after the ceremony. She was older too, though Kashan aged more slowly than humans. Her skin still shifted colors, but the movements were more subdued now, more controlled. You should be up front, Valera said. This organization exists because of you. It exists because a lot of people decided to be brave, Jake said. I was just the first one to speak. The first voice matters, Valera insisted. It gives others permission to follow. You taught the galaxy that lesson. One person can make a difference. One person taking a stand can change everything. Jake looked around at the representatives from 20 different species. Each of them was there because they believed in protecting others. Each of them had been inspired, directly or indirectly, by what had happened 15 years ago. I guess sometimes being stupid and brave pays off, Jake said with a slight smile. Valera laughed, a sound like crystal chimes. Perhaps humans are both the bravest and the most foolish species in the galaxy. I think we decided we can be both, Jake reminded her. Yes. And perhaps that is your greatest strength. Jake lived another 30 years. He never stopped working as a liaison between species. He never stopped telling the story of the war and the volunteers who had saved the Cashin. He made sure those 3,000 names were never forgotten. When he died at 77, peacefully in his sleep, both Earth and every Cashin world observed a day of mourning. His funeral was attended by representatives from 40 species. Queen Valera, now very old herself, gave the eulogy. Jake Mitchell was not a soldier or a politician or a leader of nations, she said. He was a construction worker from Ohio who could not look away when people needed help. He taught us that anyone can be a hero. All it requires is the decision to act when action is needed. The galaxy is better because he lived. We are all better because he showed us what courage looks like. Jake was buried in Cleveland, next to his parents and grandparents. His headstone was simple: Jake Mitchell. He took a stand. But his real legacy lived on in the coalition of the willing, in the friendship between humans and Cashin, in the millions of lives saved because one person decided that silence was not an option. The story of the construction worker who started a revolution by opening his mouth in a crowd became legend. It was taught in schools on dozens of worlds. It inspired other species to act when they saw injustice. It reminded the galaxy that civilization was not about technology or power, but about the choice to help others even when it was difficult. And somewhere in the universe, whenever someone saw injustice and hesitated, they would remember the story of Jake Mitchell. They would remember that one person speaking up can change everything. They would remember that the most powerful weapon in the galaxy is not a fleet of warships or advanced technology, but compassion, backed by the courage to act on it. The Cashin never forgot, the humans never forgot, and the galaxy learned a lesson it desperately needed to learn: that standing silent in the face of evil is itself a choice, and that sometimes the most ordinary person can do the most extraordinary thing simply by deciding that they cannot look away.